We're live. We're on the
Guys,
stream.
we're live. Yay!
Definitely am. And this is going to be the best time because this is about the fourth time we've done this.
Oh,
Is it
yeah.
not? And
Let's
so
go.
it's just such a joy to sit down and talk again with Tiffany Brown about her wonderful book, Landmarks. And so we've done this before, but let's start again talking about how we first met.
Okay, well, you were filling in for my teacher who was out on maternity leave,
Having a baby.
sixth grade teacher, and you came in for about 6 weeks and
Yes.
taught us all kinds of stuff about American history, and we had a great time.
We did, but part of what the deal we did was we did it so that I wouldn't have to teach math or science, and my mom would not have to teach social studies or English. And so that worked out perfectly because I did not want to teach math or science. I wanted to teach the fun stuff.
Yes, and
Yes.
part of that English teaching, you started a creative writing
Right.
club after school. And so we would go out on the playground and sit out there and do some creative writing. And that's actually one of the first places where I realized that I enjoyed writing and that I might have a little bit of talent for it.
Right.
And so that's kind of where the whole writing thing began.
Well, it definitely did. And so, again, my point to everybody, I think this is such a big point, is that not everybody realizes how many kids at that age are creative and they don't ever get told that, and that was to me, the biggest point that I could take from that whole teaching.
Yeah. Well, we were a pretty awesome class, I have to say.
You guys were a pretty awesome class. Absolutely.
But yeah, you definitely had a way of finding the talent and pointing that out and kind of just cultivating that in us. And some of us didn't even realize we had talent. And so you really had an eye for that. And so I feel like you definitely kind of helped me get started in realizing that I had talent in writing and in art.
Right.
So some kids just need somebody to point that out for them and kind of push them to try new things.
To me, that was one of the really important things was that, there are these kids. And then I was in college classes and then I saw Megan McDonald and Jennifer Grant and you and all these other people. I realized these guys are every bit as good as these people that I went to WashU with. And they're that good and nobody knows it.
Yeah. Well,
it's a strange deal, but it's absolutely wonderful. And then we got back together last year, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, so you sent me a message and kind of just asked how I was doing, and we got into a conversation. And I had been working on.
By the way, let me point out, you sent me a message about you liking my podcast. That was
yes, that's what it was. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I had listened to your podcast, and I honestly didn't really know about the strokes and everything, and so that was a big surprise for me. And but I was really excited to see what you're doing with the podcast and how you're telling people's stories, and that you're just a great listener and interviewer, and so I was excited about that. And then I had been working on what I was hoping would be a book someday, but I had no
idea.
I didn't know how it was ever going to be a book. But so I just thought, well, I wonder if Gail would like reading this. So I sent it to you.
Chapter by chapter.
Chapter by chapter. I had not started it from start to finish. I just wrote it chapter by chapter.
Well, let's talk about that. And what's the premise of the book?
So it came out of a really dark time in my life. I was going through a divorce, and just everything I had pretty much worked for, and everything my whole life, it just kind of came crashing down. And so I was kind of faced with this time of looking back at my life and trying to figure out what God was trying to do, and what this meant for my future. And so I had started a job at Oxford, and I was taking care of people in their home. And I had been washing dishes for one of my clients one day. And while I was doing that, God just started speaking to me about how the Israelites, every time that they would come to a milestone in their life or something significant would happen, they would build an altar and give the place a name, and they would worship the Lord there. And it was forever a memory that they had of something that God had done in their life. And so then God kind of started showing me how there had been milestones in my life like that, and how even though I was in a place where I felt like I didn't have any hope, he started to show me that I did, and that he had been there through every season of my past. And so that day, while washing dishes, he just laid it all out for me and started showing me those landmarks in my life, and told me to call it landmarks, and that's where it began.
Well, talk about how long did it take you to write the whole thing?
It took me about 4 years, because I did a lot of arguing with God over it.
Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah, I knew that God was asking me to be real and vulnerable. And I had always been someone who wanted the whole world to see me as this perfect picture of a Christian woman. And, so God asking me to kind of put it all out there, that was really scary for me, really scary. And so I would start writing, and things would start flowing, and it was difficult. Like, it was physically and mentally draining, because I was reliving seasons of my past, and and I was doing it in obedience to God. But sometimes when you're trying to be obedient, your flesh tells you that this does not feel good.
Well, that's one of the things, because it is really a good book and is very honest. And so talk about how hard that was and what was involved.
About how hard what was?
About how hard the writing was, because again, it's very much it's really a good book, and it's so much a sleeve, it's just you're just on your sleeve. I just love how completely honest you are in the whole thing.
Yeah. And so some of the different things that I felt like the Holy Spirit was leading me to talk about was that I've struggled with mental illness ever since I was a teenager. And that's something that is taboo. It's especially in the church world. A lot of preachers preach out against it, that you're you don't have enough faith if you struggle with depression or anxiety or whatever. And I knew that I had faith, I had always had a lot of faith, but for whatever reason, I felt like God was not answering that prayer. And I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
Okay.
And that's definitely a word that sends people thinking, oh my goodness, this person's crazy. But, I felt like I needed to show the world that there are people who struggle with mental illness that aren't crazy, that are upstanding members of society, but it's just, it's a legitimate medical issue that sometimes requires medication. But, God brought me to a place where I can tell people, yeah, this is a struggle, but God helps me to overcome it every single day.
And not
So
only about that, but I also thought you're talking about the divorce and everything else. I mean, it's such a wonderful book, and you'd send me a chapter. It would always be in a different font and single space, but it would be absolutely so perfect that I wouldn't even want to change a letter of it. It was so good.
well, and that's also a good place where the we're having an editor came in, especially with all those crazy fonts and uh,
We
the
had to
way I had.
look, that was the first part. We had to, because my deal is when I'm writing something, I want to write all of it and get it on paper so that I know how many words I've got. And you were just sending me these things, and all of them were just so perfect and so wonderful.
Well, and like I said, I didn't really know what order I wanted it all to be in, and so that's I would write it a chapter at a time because that's how the Holy Spirit led me to do it.
Right.
Um, I would hear a word in my spirit, or and God would just continue to speak that word to me.
Uh,
So I would pray about it and say, "Okay, God, what do you want me to get out of this word, and what do you want me to write?" And it would just unfold as
okay.
I would live my life, and then it would just pour out on paper. And I didn't actually put the book in order until I was done with it, and
Right.
then um,
You almost
God
didn't
just
even know you were done with it. There was a point when we were talking about it, and I was telling you this is a book, and you were like, maybe, maybe not. And it was a book.
yeah, and yeah, it was scary for me because I wanted it to be something that I could present to the world,
Right.
and um, being the perfectionist that I am, it was
Right.
really hard for me to like get my unwrap my fingers from that and
Right.
um, put it out there. So that was a big step for me.
Well, and that's one of those things that when we started coming up with the idea for the podcast and the nonprofit and everything, that's one of the points that I really felt like I helped you realize this is good enough. This is worth publishing and it's really good. And you need to understand how good it is.
Well, and it took. I mean, you had to get a little stern with me there towards the end.
Yes,
Like,
I did.
just get this to me now.
Well, it's so funny because even when you got the edits back on the book and you really had nothing to complain about, you still wanted to hold on to it. It was hard to get you to hold on to this. Tell me about that. Tell me about editing. How was that?
Well, I fought that at first
At first,
for about a couple hours
right?
when I started
You
because
sure complained about it for sure.
I did. I let you know, as I always do. I'm
Yes,
kind of opinionated about
right.
things
Absolutely.
sometimes. But yeah, I didn't like it at first because I was afraid that um, the spirit of the book would be just
And
squelched.
no writer likes to be edited. No writer likes it at first. But my feeling is that if you're good at it, you learn and you see how much that perspective of the other person is that really helps you.
Yeah, and I caught on to that really fast.
Uh,
And it actually started feeding the perfectionist in me because I'm like, wow, this person can help me make this more perfect.
yes.
So, yeah. And then I loved it. I loved what I learned from it.
Right.
And she made it easy, and I was done with it.
And that's one of those things that still, even in that last holding on to the thing, you were just still wanting to hang on. And then immediately we came and we got it right, and we realized this book is just so wonderful. It's going to help so many people. That's still my belief.
And that's the biggest deal for me is I knew from the beginning that God wanted to use this to help people. And that was what he continued to remind me during the times where I was fighting and didn't want to do it. And um, I had several different things that happened that just kept confirming. And it was usually when I would write for a while and it would be too hard and it would make me too emotional. And So I'd put it away for a while and think, this really stinks. I don't enjoy this.
That's one of those things. And then let's talk about the job and what all happened with that.
Yeah. So I started feeling like I needed to move back to the Crane area.
Right.
And I was kind of tossing that around too. I wasn't sure about it, but then a job came open at the nursing home in Crane.
Right.
And I applied for it, and like the day after I applied, they called me, and by the end of that week, I had a job. And so I just took that as God leading me to come back to Crane. And I was living up in Bolivar at the time, so my son and I packed everything up, and we bought a house in Aurora.
Right.
And I started the job there, and 4 months later, I find out that they're closing the facility.
Right.
That I wouldn't have a job anymore.
Yes.
So first, I'm like, okay, God, what were you thinking?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
what was God thinking? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So I have experienced too much with God, and He has got me through so many things that I can't doubt for very long, because every step of the way He has always led me where He wanted me to go. And so I knew that it hadn't been a mistake.
Right.
And so I just started realizing that God was probably making me just pushing me out and making me have to step out there and get into ministry like I had always known I needed to do.
Yes.
And He brought me to a point where it's like, okay, it's time.
Yeah, definitely. That was one of those things that I could see it. I could tell that this was going to happen, but I just knew that you were fighting that, a little bit all the way. And then once it happened, you had to realize this is the deal.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's hard when you're a single mom. It's you have to, it's just more comforting to know that you have a stable income, or you know that the bills are going to be paid. And but as soon as I made the decision and said, okay, wherever you want to take me with this, I'm all in, and I trust you. And immediately opportunities started coming my way, and just ways for me to be able to have an income and still be able to be home and homeschool my son Jonah, and to be able to write and do more with the book.
Well, let's talk about that. What's going on now?
Well,
a couple of things going, and I want to talk about that definitely.
About the speaking.
Yes.
Or so that was another thing I felt like God was leading me to do, was to get out and speak about my testimony and share with church and different groups about the book. And so that has taken some courage too. And so I'm kind of slowly sticking my toes in the water, and that I've got a couple of places that I'm going to be going the next couple weeks.
Right.
And so hopefully I'll continue to have more speaking engagements come open. And I do feel like that this is a message that needs to be shared, that people need to know that they have hope even when they're in situations that seem hopeless.
And let's talk about the perfect Christian thing. Talk about what you had to learn to write this book.
Yeah, I was raised in a Christian home, and always was a Christian from the time I was small. But,
that was really important to you. It's not like that was tangential. That was all really important to you from the beginning.
Yeah, and I believe that I had good intentions most of my life, and but
you want to be perfect.
That perfectionist mentality was how I viewed everything in life. And that's how I viewed the way I thought God viewed me, and the way people viewed me. And so my whole life was kind of a charade, trying to make people believe that I was perfect, trying to make myself believe that I was perfect. And I believed that as long as I was a good girl and did everything the best that I could, that God would love me. And but if I messed up or made a mistake and the world knew about it,
right,
then I would just destroy my testimony, and that people would turn away from God because of me. And so I had to be this perfect testimony of what it is to be an amazing Christian.
right.
And so it wasn't until I was in my early 30s and I got to a place where I couldn't, I just felt like I couldn't claw my way out of the situation I was in.
Okay.
And all of that just kind of crashed down around me. I was overwhelmed and was trying to do too many things at once, and mostly so that I could have this great image to show the world that, you know, I was just this superwoman.
Right.
And I just crumbled. And it was then that I realized that when I was being good and as perfect as I could be, that it didn't make God love me anymore. Right. But then when I just, my whole life was screwed up and things just came crashing down, that God didn't love me any less. And
right.
So I realized at that point that it wasn't about me anymore. And it never had been about me. It was only about what God did for me on the cross. That I didn't have to earn love anymore. I didn't have to earn his love. Right. That he offers it to all of us freely.
Yes.
Where we're at. And that was when I truly experienced real grace for the first time in my life. And I was in my 30s. Wow. And I think it's because it was the first time I actually accepted that true grace.
Right. And so now let's talk about the pricing of the book. Talk about that.
Yeah. So, you know, from the beginning, we talked about this being something that we wanted anybody to be able to get their hands on.
Right.
It's such an important message for people. And so it's only through a donation basis.
Let's talk about who that came from.
Yeah, one of my favorite singers is Keith Green. He was a very passionate singer and piano player and preacher.
Yes.
Back in the late 70s, early 80s. And I was introduced to him by my dad.
Okay.
And then I introduced him to you.
Sure did. I've heard all the music, and I did not know about this awesome musician. I was just stunned.
So you're welcome.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you every day for that. That was amazing.
Yeah. And he just was always an inspiration to me through the years. He was one of the reasons why I wanted to learn piano and lead worship and sing. Right. And but mostly just his passion and his testimony was what really inspired me. And that was how he made his music available, was he just made it available to anybody, no matter how much they could pay for it. If they couldn't afford to buy it, then he'd give it to them for free. Right. So that's what you and I discussed and decided that we wanted to do. Yes,
and with the help of Gretchen Russell, we got a 501c3 formed, and we've just made this ultimate in less than a year adventure that I just love so much. And that's why I just think that all we're doing is going to help so many people, including the stuff that I'm doing with the podcast, and then the stuff that you're doing with the stuff you do. Because I just think you're so fantastic.
Well, thank you. And I feel the same way about you. And I love the way you're allowing people to tell their stories,
Right.
and I'm excited about the future stories that are going to come out of this too, because I
Well,
know that there are stories brewing within the hearts of many people who God is telling them the same thing. You need to tell your story, and
exactly. And you
this
can. That's the thing.
that's right.
So much of this is you have to realize that not only is this, it's a good platform, but also uses my talents really well to help people kind of realize how much more they have to offer than they know, if that makes
Exactly,
sense.
and it's kind of the same thing that you did with us back in 6th grade.
Right.
You helped us develop that and realize that we had things that we didn't even see in ourselves, and it's basically the same idea that you're doing with Heroes and Miracles and your podcast, is helping people to realize that their story is important.
Right.
And so that's the exciting thing that we get to share with the world, is we get to pull those stories out of people that don't even realize they have a story.
Definitely. They don't realize. I love to say everybody's got a story to tell. And I still have to say, after a year of doing this, I still believe it more now than I did when I started.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all come together so fast and so
It really
miraculously.
has. It's
And
just
so,
miraculous.
yep, it's only the beginning.
Now, so let's talk about where they can find this book.
You can find this book at heroesandmiracles.org,
Okay.
and through any size donation, they can receive this book.
Right.
And then I also have a website, tiffanycathleenministries.com. You can also find the book there and follow my blog, and I have a lot of encouraging stories and messages to share with people on there too.
Because you're also writing for the Branson Globe.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that opened up to me the day that I decided I was going to give it all to God and jump in and write for Him. And the day after, my friend Cindy Thomas, who also writes for the Branson Globe, she just felt led of the Lord to ask me if that was something I was interested in, and she called Rob at the paper and told him about me, and told him that I had a talent for writing.
Right.
And I went and talked to him one day, and he said, "Okay, you're a writer for us. You can start writing whatever you feel like you need to write." And
That's wonderful.
so I started a column called Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Okay.
And I write encouraging things in there, just like what you would read in my book and in my blog. So yeah, that was.
And
Really,
what other projects are you doing now? Because you got is it a lesson guide or what is that?
yeah, I am working on a lesson guide, study guide type of thing. It's also sort of to help somebody develop their own strength and journaling, because in the book, that's something that I include a lot, is the journals that I wrote throughout the years.
Right.
From the time I was very young. And that's really what helped me look back and see all the seasons of my life where God had been there. And so the study guide is to sort of lead people to look back and see those times where God was in their life.
Right.
And it sort of just follows along with the book.
That's so fantastic. And what else do you want to say to our audience? Our huge audience, clearly.
Yeah. Well, if you're struggling with a dark season in your life, I just want to say that God is there. He will be there every step of the way. Sometimes we just have to take a look and see how he got us through seasons of our past, and realize that even when it seems like he's not there, he's there and he has a purpose. So don't lose hope, and just look to God, and he's going to make a way, and he's going to show you what he's doing with this season of your life.
And also, they're welcome to give to Heroes and Miracles. We should, tout that because we do need to make sure that we continue to be able to publish these wonderful stories.
Sure. Yeah. Heroes and Miracles. It's a nonprofit, like you said, and we want to make it available to people to be able to share their story without any out-of-pocket cost to the author or whoever
Right.
is sharing their story. And then also we're making it available to anybody, our publications, to be available to anybody regardless.
Same theory, yes.
Yes. So that it still takes money.
Yes, it does.
Lots of money.
Right.
To publish a book and
to hire professional editors, all the things you have to do. I mean, in other words,
yeah,
the thing came together really close because Tiffany is a wonderful writer. But it's also one of these things that as we go on, want to make sure that all the talent is available to make all the publications as professional as we can.
Right. And you have done a great job of making this whole process just very professional and doing it well. And that's what's so special about this too. And why we need support is so that this can be done well.
Yes.
So it's something that the world wants to receive. Sometimes if it's not done well, then it's not going to quite have the impact that it would.
Exactly. Right. That's right. And I've got a wonderful children's book that I want to do for the second thing that we're doing. And of course, that will leave all the profits to Heroes and Miracles. And that's so fun for me to think about that book that I wrote back when it was the era of teaching those kids at Crane. And it's a wonderful little poem. And that's a great second project.
Yeah, it really is.
Yes.
Very touching, especially as one of your students.
Yes.
to read that, and it just shows the heart that you have for the kids.
Well, and that's one of those things that, again, the whole thing where I taught sixth grade for 6 weeks and then second grade for 6 weeks and just found so much art and life in those kids all the way throughout. And it's just really amazing to me how many kids get overlooked and they don't ever really understand how talented they are.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Give me those web addresses one more time.
Heroesandmiracles.org.
Okay.
And TiffanyKathleenMinistries.com.
Okay. Well, this is so fun. And thank you so much for being on here and talking to us.
Thank you, Dale.
And finally, after this time, we have a red signal, so we're doing it right. And so we'll talk about it later. And I'll get off here. All right. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks. Bye.